time before Dr. Hall. Really, there was. There was a time before the nephrologist, before the kidney donor and recipient, before the lung recipient, before the clinic in the Amazon jungle, before the doctorate in medicine, the master's in Far Eastern studies, before graduating Harvard in 3 years, majoring in Chinese, before being head of her class at Dana Hall. There was a time before Susan Ho was Susan Ho, when she was Susan Hammond, daughter of Daniels and Muriel Larson Hammond, 10th generation descendant of the Puritan Francis Hammond, one of the 7 founders in 1649 of Medfield, Massachusetts, the town in which we grew up as neighbors, where she was known to me, her family, and all the world simply as Susie. As you have shared Dr. Ho, I would now like to tell you a little about Susie. Susie was 2 years old when she arrived as my neighbor, past the stone wall and across the meadow at the wood's edge. She had an older sister, Anne, and an infant brother we called Stoke, for reasons I never understood. And they built their home on the last piece of original Hammond land in the town. I was 8, and once I got past the resentment of these people digging up my neighborhood and building their house where my birches once stood, I not only accepted them as neighbors, but I adopted them as my family of choice. In the years to come, the school bus would drop us off at the Hammond home, and I would not go home until supper time. And my mother was not the least bit concerned because she knew I was safe at the Hammonds. As the eldest of the tribe of kids, I was absorbed into the family as a big brother, a status awarded me by Susie, and one she never rescinded. I'm humbled that Susie, your Dr. Ho, had a special place in her heart for me and held me there for her entire life. My earliest memory of Susie is of a very young child, perhaps 4 years old, astride a Mobo pedal-riding horse. It was a stamped metal contraption, and you can actually buy one on eBay today for $350 plus $82 shipping. Now, if you can afford it, I urge you to consider buying this thing. And then, please, destroy it. Use a cutting torch, a sawzall, whatever it takes. There should be no possibility of this thing ever having another life. You see, this Mobo pedal riding horse was ridden by pushing down on the stirrups and then relaxing. Thus propelled, it might move 3 or possibly even 4 inches. And in the process, it would make the most ungodly screeching sound you've ever heard. It was the sound of unlubricated pressed steel against cold rolled steel reverberating around a cellar devoid of acoustic absorbent material. Each screech reinforced the one before it, and the cacophony would drive a deaf person to despair, I tell you, to despair. For all of it, Susie loved the darn thing, and demonstrating the tenacity that would characterize her life, did an endless posting trot round and round the cellar until her mother eventually, compassionately commanded her to stop. Now, Susie was born a little over 2 years after her father stormed the beaches of Normandy in the D-Day invasion. I was born earlier, a little over a year after the attack on Pearl Harbor. We were both war babies. So it should come as no surprise that we played numerous war games. And when I would be wounded in combat, the hero of course, it fell to Susie and her older sister Anne to tend to my wounds. They were to be my nurses. Now Anne was okay with it, but Susie insisted she was a doctor. And so I had to explain to her now in the late 1940s, early 50s, that no, girls were nurses and boys were doctors. Well, you can see how that went. In the words of Moscow Mitch, she persisted. Susie had the complete Little Golden Book library. Much of it was committed to memory, and as a 5-year-old, she could read it to a parent as well as they could to her. Her natural creativity and sense of whimsy had her creating her own fiction around her protagonist, Humphrey Baglet, by age 5 or so. Evidently, as Susie grew older, Humphrey evolved as a Dutchman and acquired a companion. We're happy for Humphrey. Susie was not only creative, but adventurous and more than a little curious. She wondered, for example, what would happen if she put dirt in the oil filter of her father's lawnmower. Well, it turned out it made it hard to start, and no small amount of work for a very patient and understanding dad. As Susie was a student at Harvard, I began my career in penology by creating a program to facilitate the release of inmates being paroled from state prison. One of my early clients was Al Barros, a handsome man of Portuguese descent, who had won the approbation of his employer, Henry Klaus, the founder of Acoustic Research and later KLH, where Al was a production supervisor and enjoyed an unusually generous salary for one in his condition. Susie met Al, and we enjoyed socializing with him and his friends on occasion. We were particularly impressed one night when we went to the famous Verst House in Harvard Square. And rather than join the line wrapping around the building, Al went to the head of the line, spoke to the ex-con maitre d', and we were immediately seated amid a chorus of hisses and boos. While enjoying our Benbro, Susie raised the idea of inviting Al to her home to meet her parents and have dinner. Uncharacteristic of her liberal Unitarian beliefs, Mrs. Hammond expressed concern over having her silver stolen. We assured her that one does not serve 20 years to the day on a double life sentence for stealing silver. And we would go on to enjoy a lovely dinner in the former dining room, during which Al eagerly embraced as a learning experience and an opportunity for humor the formal table settings and other things Muriel had designed to embarrass him. In time, Al became a family friend of the Hammonds, as we have with my family. Susan also met with Boston's infamous art thief, Miles Connors, the prime suspect in the 1990 Gardner Museum robbery, until the investigators discovered that he was indeed still serving time in the state's maximum security prison at Walpole. Miles was indeed an expert in Oriental art and was looking to learn Chinese, and Susie gave him a primer on what he needed to begin that study and offered him ongoing support. Now, we have already heard how Susie caused some embarrassment in a restaurant upon ordering in Chinese. Here's a similar story. It seems that a consulate general from China was visiting Boston, and Susie was among the Harvard Chinese scholars invited to his reception. For this, she needed a new dress. So she called and asked if I could take her to Chinatown to buy a Susie Wong dress. She knew right where to go, and when we arrived, went straight away to the racks and picked out a couple of dresses. She asked the older gentleman behind the counter if there was a dressing room, and he replied, no, but you can just use the space behind the racks. Your privacy is assured. And he went back to chatting quietly with his three elderly gentlemen companions. After making her selection, Susie again approached the gentleman, and this time, speaking Chinese, asked, how much does this dress cost? The gentleman behind the counter turned crimson red. His companions fled the store. And so later on the street, I asked Susan, what was that all about? Well, it appears they were assessing Susie's physical attributes. And they were particularly approving of her petite size, appropriate for women, as in China. Not unlike the ever so common Amazons in America. She got an exceptionally good price on that, right? Susie, it turns out, knows how to use her assets. And by that, of course, I mean her ability to speak Chinese. My Susie went on to become your Dr. Ho. The tenacity she demonstrated riding that steel pony was the same tenacity that saw her through her education, her accidents and illnesses, and overcoming the bureaucratic hurdles of establishing a clinic in South America. And this is to say nothing of climbing Mount Sinai or swimming in the Sea of Galilee, though frankly, I'm wondering if she might not just have walked across it. The curiosity that inspired her to fill a lawnmower oil filter with dirt was the same curiosity that made her an effective researcher. And her little library, her little golden book library would expand greatly over the years, and the creative energy that gave us Humphrey Bailey would see her published in the New England Journal of Medicine and other prestigious publications. Inviting a former lifer into her parents' home was calculated. She knew how her mother in particular would respond, and she wanted to confront the racial bigotry and stereotypes that lay beneath her mother's espoused liberal beliefs. In honesty, her mother's beliefs were normally manifest in her daily life, and this truly was an exception. There is one final anecdote from Susie's early life that I'd like to share with you. It incorporates many of the values and attributes we have enumerated here today, including insight, patience, pomposity, deflating humor, courage, bravery, and grit. But most of all, pomposity, deflating humor. Dana Hall is an all-female secondary school widely regarded as a prep school for nearby Wellesley College, from which both her mother and grandmother were graduated. Susie had procured a student work study type of job as an administrative assistant in the biology department, and as it turned out, a spectacular platform for a student prank. Now, there was a tradition at Dana Hall to have an outdoor event for students and their fathers a few days before commencement. This particular event was blessed with a splendid New England summer day, cloudless skies, moderate temperature, low humidity. As the informal chit-chat gave way for the head of school to welcome guests and into a formal luncheon, a large pickup truck towing a substantial trailer appeared before the Helen Temple Cook Library and Dining Center, the very focal point of the campus. Truck and trailer signage told the assembly It was from Burgess Farm in Medfield. And as Jim Burgess led a cow down the lower ramp, the assemblage shared a collective jaw drop. So here's Jim holding on to a cow in one hand, and in the other hand he's displaying a bill of lading and an official Dana Hall purchase order for quantity 1 bovine polled Hereford. Faculty and staff scurried about trying to determine what in the world was going on. I assure you full panic ensued, during which Jim quietly put the cow back on the trailer and drove on. Only 2 people knew what had just happened. Your Dr. Hull and her father, who had, in my version, her father had figured out that his long-time friend and schoolmate, Jim Burgess, had done a favor for his little Susie. The alternate version from her family that I discovered last night is that her dad was a co-conspirator in this cow caper. So here's the long and the short of it from the perspective of an old friend and neighbor. The prophet Micah asks, "What does the Lord demand of you, O mortal?" The Lord demands that you do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. Brian Stevenson, the death row lawyer and advocate for criminal justice reform, tells us that the opposite of poverty is justice. The opposite of poverty is justice. When Susie Hammond took her inheritance and created a medical clinic in poverty-stricken Bolivia, she was doing justice. When Dr. Ho started the Dada Ding project by creating a foundation to get Daddy out of China to receive treatments not available in her native land, Susie was doing justice. When she paid college tuition and collected medications for the needy, Susie was doing justice. When she held the elevator for another, though in a rush herself, when she tousled the hair of her adult son as when he was a child, when she donated her healthy kidney to a stranger, Susie was manifesting the loving kindness that characterized her entire life and career. A pericope of ritual from the Order of Vimoe's Mother's Degree says, "Within the bounds of reason, you can do anything but reach the height of your mother's hopes. It was she who carried you long months neath her arm, took God's hand in hers, and walked through the valley of shadows that you might live." Susie walked humbly with her God, 3 times bearing children. But how many more times did she take the hand of God, literally or metaphorically, while treating strangers committed to her loving care? What does the Lord demand of you, O mortal? God demands that you do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. God, O mortals, demands that we live our lives as Susan Hammond, Dr. Ho, lived hers. Blessed be. Let me close with these words from the Navajo tradition. Beauty is before me, and beauty behind me. Above me and below me hovers the beautiful. I am surrounded by it. I am immersed in it. In my youth, I am aware of it, and in old age, I shall walk quietly the beautiful trail. In beauty it has begun. In beauty it ended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you all for coming. And there's food. We welcome you to stay around and talk with each other and to enjoy some of the drinks and food that's available in some of the rooms that are scattered around. Thank you very much.